Coming up next on This Week in Computer Hardware, we have the AMD Radeon R9 and R7 series of graphics cards. We have a new gaming notebook from Asus and a Western Digital NAS powered by Xeon and a whole lot more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 238, recorded October 10th, 2013, GPU Vendor Drama. Hey everybody, welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I am doing the introduction today because Patrick is out with some family business to attend to. It's all good. It's all good. He'll be here next week again. Nothing to worry about there. Joining me in his place is my good friend, Alan Malventano. Alan, how are you doing today?
Hey.
This makes two podcasts in 2 days. Is that too much for you?
It's okay. I'm chugging Joe Cola and I'm good.
keeping you running full circle. Welcome to This Week in Computer Hardware. We talk about, as you might have guessed it, computer hardware. If you are new to the show, please visit us at twit.tv/twitch. That's TWICH. There's no second T in that name, TWICH. You can find all the back episodes, find the videos, figure out how to subscribe to the RSS feeds and all your various podcatchers and that kind of stuff. And then if you want to send us an email, which we highly encourage you to do so, the email address is twitch@twit.tv, TWICH@twit.tv. Again, pretty easy to handle. So let's talk about some hardware stuff that happened this week, Al. I think we teased it enough last week when Patrick and I were on here about the release of some new Radeon GPUs, and I think maybe some people are going to be disappointed that this isn't the larger, better, faster, newer graphics card that AMD teased at their Hawaii Tech Day, the GPU 14 Tech Day, as they were heavily promoting it. The code name of that GPU would have been Hawaii. Instead, what we're seeing today is really a re-release, a rebrand, a reposition of existing products. They've rebranded everything now. They've gotten rid of the HD moniker, which I think that makes sense, right? High definition is no longer the big thing. It hasn't been for a while. I'm trying to remember how long it's. I guess is the Radeon HD 2000 series was the first time they did this. That was a long time ago. So gone is the HD. Now it's the Radeon R9 series, Radeon R7 series. They kind of stacked it in a very similar way to how they stack their APU lineup. They've got the A10 APUs, the A8, the A6, the A4. It kind of gives you a semblance of what features you're going to get in each stack, and then the second set of numbers will tell you what the performance is relative in that particular stack. So the R9 280X was released, the R9 270X was released, and the R7 260X. Now, like I said, these are rebrands, so these are cards that everybody's very familiar with already. The 280X is the Radeon HD 7970 gigahertz edition. Which is a product that was released. The Gigahertz Edition product was technically released, I believe, in April or May of this year. Or I'm sorry, of 2012. I think it was June of 2012. I'm just picking out numbers here at this point. The R9 270X is the Radeon HD 7870 Gigahertz Edition, and that is a part from early 2012. I want to say February, maybe March of 2012. And then the R7 260 is replacing the Radeon HD 7790, which was actually released a little bit later as well. The Bon Air GPU was the code name for that. So the R9 280X, 270X, 260X, they're parts that we already know. We know what the performance is of them, relatively speaking. Specification-wise, they're almost unchanged. The 280X is actually a little bit slower than the 7970 gigahertz edition. The 270X is a little bit faster than the 7870 gigahertz edition. And the R7 260 is a little bit faster than the 7790. But maybe what's most important is the drop in price. And everybody likes price drops. And the most significant one was on the highest end card. The R9 280X is going to sell for $299. The R9 270X is $199, and then R7 260 at $139. Let's focus on the top end one at $299, $300. That is $300 less than what the 7970 launched at in, let's say, January of 2012. Alan, in your opinion, how does that price gap equate to like actual value? Is that kind of difference over the span of let's say almost 2 years a good amount, or is that something you expect a little bit more?
Yeah, I'd expect maybe a little bit more there, but I don't know. I'm not like I go like years and years between my video card upgrades. So
You're a good replacement then for Patrick, because he does the same thing.
yeah, well, I mean, mine involved plumbing, so I tried, I just try not to mess with it.
Yeah, water cooling your GPUs does make it a little bit more complex when you want to upgrade and
Yeah.
change things around.
But likewise, because of that, when I do decide to upgrade, I tend to go with maybe one notch under the very high end.
Yeah.
So, as far as how that plays in with this.
It's interesting now because in AMD's own product stack, the R9 280X, which will actually be on sale October 11th. The existing 7000 series cards, if you can find them and you can find a good deal on them, you might want to go ahead and grab them. They're going away, but they're they're basically the same thing that these cards are. The R9 280X will be the highest end product AMD has on the market if you don't count the 7990 and its dual GPU behemoth-ness, right? So you're talking about that's a $650 to $700 graphics card still. This is $299. It's the highest priced GPU. NVIDIA has a $249, a $399, a $649, and a $999 single GPU graphics card. So AMD definitely has a lot of room here to release Hawaii, whatever, the Radeon R9 290X, as they described it during their live stream, and find a price gap anywhere above $300. It could be $400, it could be $500, it could be $600. I have no idea what it's going to be priced at or what the performance levels are going to be. The other thing I'll point out for this particular release is how much pressure it puts on NVIDIA. Because even though we know the performance of the 7970, 7870, 7790, and how those are basically translated over to these products, the price drops really change what the competition is from NVIDIA. So the R9 280X at $299 sits between the GeForce GTX 760, which is $50 less expensive, and the GeForce GTX 770, which is $100 more expensive. And in our performance testing, we showed that the R9 280X in quite a few instances is actually performing as good as, maybe a little bit better than the GTX 770, a card that is $100 more expensive coming from NVIDIA. And so that's obviously something that they have to respond to, they have to react to. Even the biggest NVIDIA fans that don't care about, they would always lean towards NVIDIA, have to start to take notice if you can get a better performing card for $100 less from AMD. The same is said for the R9 270X at $199. Its competition now is the GeForce GTX 660, and it wins that handily. And in fact, the 270X actually performs a little bit better in many cases of the GTX 760, which is again $50 more expensive than it. So it really shook up the price structure in that, I don't know what market we call it. It's not the enthusiast market anymore, but we'll call it like high-end graphics market, right? So high-end discrete graphics from $199 to $299 and a little bit above that. So NVIDIA is going to have to respond somehow, either in terms of big price drops or big bundle pack-ins, or something to that effect, because as it stands now, NVIDIA's single GPU graphics performance has some issues for sure. I do want to point out, I guess, the Never Settle bundle that had permeated the 7000 series for a long time is gone on these products, these new ones for now, and nothing really changed in the multi-GPU scaling frame pacing issue. If it was fixed on the 7000 series as of last week, it's still fixed on these 280X, 270X, 260X cards. If it wasn't fixed yet, like Eyefinity or 4K with Crossfire, then it's still not fixed with these. So single GPU solutions, the R9 280X is an awesome product and awesome performance for your dollar. If you are going to go multi-GPU or you want to buy a 4K monitor, they're still not the best option because AMD hasn't provided a solution to actually have that performance scale appropriately. We don't really need to get into a whole lot of that again because I know we've talked about it quite a bit on previous episodes of Twitch. So, Alan, I know you, like you said before, you don't upgrade your graphics card quite as often as I test new ones. So, any other kind of comment that you want to make on this, or should we just move on and talk about Steam Machine?
I have a suspicion that NVIDIA will do something pretty quickly to fill that hole, really, relative to AMD. I just think that they've got to do something. Otherwise, they're just, AMD is just going to eat their lunch.
It would be crazy to not. It literally would. The longer they sit on it, the only benefit that NVIDIA has now is that the R9 series cards aren't actually for sale yet. I think they're supposed to go on sale tomorrow as we record this. And so, it could be that tomorrow morning we wake up and NVIDIA's GPU prices are significantly lower, and all the multi-pages of testing that I did and conclusionary statements that I wrote 3 days ago are already invalid, and I have to go back and kind of update things and see how it stands. I think if that were the case, they would have already told me that those price cuts were going to come, and I haven't heard anything yet. So sooner rather than later would be good. Yeah. Let's talk about the Steam Machine hardware specs. So being as that you don't upgrade your system as often, is the idea of a Steam box for PC gaming more attractive to you or less attractive?
I think it depends on how handy whoever that customer may be. Just a hunch. Because people that tend to build their own systems are probably already have a decent system hooked up to their television. Be it might not necessarily be for pure gaming, but at least it's probably a halfway decent system for home theater PC type duty, right?
Right.
And I mean, you could take that and you can have the Steam desktop experience, or what is the name of the full screen thing for Steam?
Big picture mode.
Yeah, the big picture mode, which is pretty much made for that, right?
Yeah.
They might be doing something along those lines, but but then there is the whole the controller looks kind of spiffy.
Yep. Right? I'm very curious how. So the hardware specs that they revealed. So Valve is apparently not making their own very specific Steam machine. They are making some prototypes that they're going to send out to 300 people, random or not randomly selected in the Steam community for kind of testing and feedback. The GPUs will range from an NVIDIA GeForce Titan all the way down to a GeForce GTX 660. So you got the 760 and the 780 in between there as well. The processors are all going to be Intel Haswell based, so Core i7 4770, i5 4570, something like that. And then 16 gigs of main system memory, 3 or 2 gigs of graphics memory. You've got a terabyte hard drive that's actually a hybrid hard drive, and then a 450 watt power supply. So those are the specifications. There was a lot of hubbub about, Valve picked NVIDIA for this, and there's obviously NVIDIA latched onto it very, very quickly. They wanted to point out that AMD might have the consoles, and AMD's talking about things like Mantle with the Battlefield 4 developers, but the largest PC gaming ecosystem, look, they're using GeForce GPUs in it, and there's something to be said for that. But I think it's mostly because all these machines are going to be built on Steam OS, which is a Linux-based operating system, and despite some of the problems that the Linux community might have with NVIDIA, I think it's generally assumed, or it's generally a fair point to say that NVIDIA has better OpenGL Linux support than AMD does in their drivers for these graphics cards. That's obviously going to make some amount of difference there. I don't know. I'll be very curious to see how many other developers than Valve and how quickly they port their games over to SteamOS, how quickly they get them up and running there, because I think that's going to be the main hurdle that people have to get over. That controller, I would love to try it out. I'd love to be one of those 300 people that got one. I assume those 300 people are getting one of those, but I guess I'm not really sure. But as is normally happens with these types of things, AMD went on a kind of a PR warpath to say, hey, Doug Lombardi from Valve says, oh no, there will be AMD powered Steam machines in 2014, from different outlets and different vendors. So you'll be able to see, if you're a Radeon fan, you'll be able to get SteamOS with Radeon. I don't know what to think about SteamOS and all this stuff. I feel like I want it to be successful. I want it to be a very strong competitor to consoles, because I think it will provide a lot of benefits to PC gamers. The instant on, the ease of use, some semblance of you don't have to select all these settings if you don't want to. Something like the GeForce experience or the AMD Gaming Evolved Raptor applications attempt to do, but you'll still have the capability to adjust settings, but will people want to? I don't know. It's a mixed bag there.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of shoots at least one big part of PC gaming in the foot. It's that all that hardware that you have that's all beefy and everything. Normally, you could do whatever the heck you want with it. It doesn't have to be gaming. It just happens to be that you could fire up a game, but you could be doing anything else, right? Whereas this is really just more of a gaming kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's running Linux, so and they've said that they're not going to lock it down. So I would expect, applications like Netflix to be on here if it has Linux clients, and Hulu and that kind of stuff. So they'll try to make it an entertainment system as well. And if it's sitting in the living room, chances are the amount of people that want to use it for everyday computing will be fairly minimal, right? Based on the controllers and the interfaces that you have for it there. Now, the SteamOS and the Steam machines will also be able to do that streaming thing as well, where if you have that beefy system in your bedroom upstairs or your study, you can stream it through the local network and play the games on the TV through the controller or whatever and stream it that way. Obviously, that's not as ideal as having the game rendered locally there, even though the machine is in your house. I still think it could be, I don't know. It all depends on pricing. It all depends on how they differentiate. Is it really going to make somebody that is interested in having a Windows-based PC at their TV convert over, right? Like you were saying before. So if you want to pre-order an R9 290X, you can't really do that in the US. It was something AMD promised that you'd be able to do, is pre-order R9 290X with Battlefield 4. Battlefield 4 comes out not too much longer from now, end of this month, I guess. The beta is open. We played some of that last night after our podcast. But there are some system builders, including Main Gear, that you can pre-order an R9 290X in the guise of a complete system. So if you really, really, really want a 290X and you really want it first, you can pre-order a Main Gear F131 desktop that starts at $21.99 with a single one of the 290X cards, or you can get a Main Gear Battlefield 4 edition of the Shift PC that's almost $3,800, and it actually comes with a pair of them in Crossfire. I don't know. I think iBuyPower and CyberPower are offering these deals as well. NVIDIA is doing a big push for what they call BattleBox, which is like system builders building machines with dual GTX 780s for 4K gaming and really intense gaming scenarios. This kind of system builder back and forth battle that we've had over the last couple of weeks is really interesting, because I think in the grand scheme of things, they sell a lot fewer systems than maybe people understand or really realize. And I think it's just a bunch of jostling for bragging rights in a lot of areas. But if you must pre-order a 290X in the US without knowing the price of it, without knowing the performance of it, you can pay $2,000 or $4,000 for that. Nice system. You can get it water cooled, Alan.
Yeah, no.
Still no? No? All right. What about a gaming notebook? Do you have any interest in gaming notebooks, Alan? I mean, is that something that...
I used to?
Yeah?
Yeah, I used to have a big interest in it. Now all it seems I ever do in a notebook is write for the review site.
The idea of a gaming notebook is great, though, right? I mean, the idea that you have this gaming PC that you can take to your buddy's house, you can take to a LAN party. It's not heavy. well, maybe it's a little bit heavier for a notebook, but it's not heavy compared to a PC. It's got the monitor built in. It's got a keyboard if you need it, if you don't want to take anything extra. It's a dual purpose. Maybe you get 3-4 hours of battery life on it or something. That would be a plus as well.
I
We get
I think most of the time they end up. I think most of the time they end up being something where if you want a game on it, the battery only serves as a UPS. Usually.
Yeah. So interestingly, you say that. This Steve posted a review of the Asus G750JX DB71, which is a horrible name, but it's the G750JX. Essentially, is the model number there, and it's a gaming laptop with a 17-inch 1080p screen that has Haswell Core i7 4700 in there and a GeForce GTX 770M with 3 gigs of memory and 16 gigs of system RAM. So it's a hell of a system in terms of specifications, right? It's got all kinds of performance. It's got desktop level performance on it. I think the GTX 770M equates to a 760 on the desktop, maybe a 660. I'll have to look.
That's pretty beefy.
But the gaming performance on it was great. Not as good as we've tested one other machine recently that was better than that, but that had a GTX 780M in it. So obviously you're going to get better gaming performance on a higher end GPU. But it had really, really good gaming performance playing things at 1080p like BioShock Infinite, Metro 2033 at very high settings. I mean, it's able to output some performance, some impressive performance numbers there. But he ran into an issue where the frame rate when you were running on a battery was almost cut in half. And after some back and forth with Asus, they finally admitted that it was a design decision that when you're on the battery, that they don't let the GPU clock very high at all. I think I forget what the frequency was, maybe a few hundred megahertz, I guess, maybe a couple hundred megahertz. So the difference is like at BioShock Infinite at 1080p at ultra settings, under AC power was getting almost 80 frames per second, and on the battery was under 40, just under 40 frames per second. I understand their goal to increase battery life, but to me, you should give the user that option, right? So I say, I realize I'm only going to get an hour worth of gaming, but I want that hour worth of gaming on this flight. Let me use it. I don't know if you think there maybe could be any other thermal restrictions, but I wouldn't think so. If they have, if they can run it on AC power, they should be able to run it on battery, right?
I would think maybe 3 different things. They might have made just the power circuitry that handles drawing power from the battery and passing it on to the rest of the laptop. Maybe it could only handle so much, and they just didn't design it to, maybe they wanted something that was more efficient and just could handle less power overall, and that just because of that, they were sort of forced to do that. It's also possible that they might have just wanted to, I don't want to say game, but they might have wanted to just make it so that they could say that this will last like 3 hours on the battery, even when you're gaming, right? Maybe the PR guys sort of, marketing guys might have won out over the design guys that wanted it to go full, because the design guys are always going to want it to do absolutely everything, whether it's on a battery or whatever, right? They're going to want the best, just raw performance. Whereas, then you get the marketing guys jump in and they're like, no, we want 3 hours of battery life in a gaming laptop, that kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. They could do that. I agree.
Just a hunch. I don't know. But I totally agree with you. I mean, this should be something that's user selectable, though, right? It should be just like any power profile or. Yeah.
Right. And so like we tried all the different settings in the Asus software, and he even tried uninstalling the Asus software. It was definitely something that was hard limited on it. So whatever it was firmware based or, actual circuitry based, something like that. But even then, obviously not a lot of people are going to want to be gaming off of AC power on this machine. So I think it starts at $1,800 for this particular configuration, which is a lot of money, but for a gaming laptop, not out of this world. So check out that review if you guys are interested in that. I know we get a lot of questions about gaming notebooks here and other places. A couple more little stories before we get into a handful of emails. This one kind of goes back into the whole system builder deal. There's this big conspiracy / I don't know what else to call it. It's a conspiracy that has a lot of interesting facts coming in and out of it. So Origin PC is a manufacturer, a boutique system builder that takes mostly off-the-shelf components, puts them in systems, configures them, tests them, makes them look really good and sells them at a markup, right? Same thing like Falcon Northwest or Main Gear or CyberPower, those same types of guys that we were talking about earlier. Well, last week, Origin PC put out a press release to alert the media that they had decided to drop AMD Radeon graphics cards from their systems and that they were only going to sell systems using NVIDIA GeForce cards. Now, the reasons that it was reported, as it says here in this story over at Semi-Accurate, which is still a funny name considering the type of writing they do, this decision was based on a combination of many factors, including customer experiences, GPU performance, drivers and stability, and requests from our support staff. So the claim from Origin is like, we are making this decision to drop AMD cards because they don't meet the performance criteria or the stability and user experience criteria that we demand from our customers. And that in and of itself is kind of a great thing, right? That maybe there's a company out there that would be willing to eschew relations and marketing dollars and all this other kind of stuff for the benefit of the consumer could be seen as a good thing. We don't think these are great products, and so regardless of what everybody else might be doing, we're going to choose to not sell them. However, it's more complicated than that, as it turns out, because the fact that they released a press release for it was kind of suspicious, because usually if a company is kind of they're dropping a product line from it that used to be available for sale, rather than try to really piss off that company, you just quietly change it and, move on about your business. It's not usually something you go out and try to really promote. And so that kind of led Charlie in this story over at Semi-Accurate to kind of do some more investigating and do some reading. And his assertions are now is that NVIDIA being the aggressor in this case, went around to companies and said, hey, if you drop AMD graphics cards from your configuration options, we'll supplement the lost income from that with additional marketing dollars, and we'll help promote you as long as you do this and you are public about it. Now, this story goes on to say that they have some sources about it that say that this is the case, that they approached many other people. NVIDIA has said that's not the case. The CEO for this company has said that's not the case. And it's one of those things where you're just going to have to pick a side that you believe in or believe neither of them and kind of move on. It says here, Origin PCO CEO Kevin, oh man, I can't pronounce this name, Wozaleski, gave the following non-denial. Not sure who told you that, but I would definitely like to comment on that because we absolutely do not want anyone to get the impression, which is the impression being that NVIDIA, they're paid off by NVIDIA to make that decision. So, Alan, what do you think about this kind of controversy, this specific controversy, and how this, does it affect either of these graphics card companies in any way, or does it really only affect this particular system builder?
Well, I mean, Origin, I guess this sort of answers and asks another question at the same time. But Origin is not a huge vendor, right? They're more of a niche kind of thing, really, really high end. I mean, it's almost like a higher end version of Alienware, if you want to call it that, right?
We'll say, let's say, I think the numbers are somewhere in the 5,000 to 7,000 systems a year is all range.
Yeah. So they don't make a lot. So now I'm not really sure why they would come out with a press release saying it. Maybe they just wanted to head off people possibly asking them, hey, why are there no AMD options available when I go to configure my system? Maybe they just headed those questions off at the pass. But if you're such a niche thing and you can't really work in volume because they don't have huge volume, so they really can't afford to deal with anything in the area of any kind of quirkiness or driver instability or whatever the things they mentioned. Basically, they just, if they can't do that, if they're selling two different kinds of graphics cards, the limited number of people they have at their company, I'm assuming limited because it's a relatively small company. they have to split their support both like 2 different ways when it comes to video right now. So if anything, it's probably a company like that probably has a tendency to just lean towards only going with one in the first place, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, and if they're faced with that kind of a decision, maybe they were just, okay, well, which one do we have to spend more time supporting? Oh, well, it happens to be AMD. Okay. You know, and then I still don't get why the PR for it, though. That seems kind of weird.
It seems very suspect. I think that they would release a press release for it. NVIDIA has been known in the past to be hyper aggressive in its marketing and its PR. And I had really felt over the last couple of years that had been toned down quite a bit. But it could be that NVIDIA internally is under a lot of pressure to make noise and have changes occur because AMD is making so much noise about being in the consoles, being the dominant graphics provider there. You know, they have all these game bundles. They've got all these game developers now talking about the benefits of Radeon that they haven't had until recently. So it's possible that NVIDIA feels like they have to do some of this because what else are they going to do? They've got Tegra, they've got Shield. None of those products are like flying off the shelf right now. The Quadro line is still really strong. That's where they make, huge profit margins there. They've got NVIDIA Grid, they've got GeForce. So how do they make sure that they still have a place in this market in years to come? And to me, the fact that they sell 5,000 systems a year, at best, you're talking about 10,000 graphics cards a year if everybody buys SLI, which they won't, right? So is that really going to affect NVIDIA's bottom line, 8,000 graphics cards? It can't. And if it does, that's another problem for NVIDIA for a different discussion, right? It's odd to see all this stuff. To me, if NVIDIA is doing that, if they're trying to get these companies to drop AMD, I think it's bad for the industry. It's bad for everybody, right? Because competition breeds benefits for consumers, right? So if Hawaii GPU comes out and it's really great, now you can't buy it at Origin PC. Really, all that means for a consumer is chances are they're not going to have a whole lot of a brand loyalty to Origin PC. They're going to go someplace else. For Origin, how many sales are they going to miss not having the new hot GPU when it comes out this month or next month or whenever it's going to be? And obviously, if there was some kind of behind the cabinet dealings and all this, they made a decision that the potential money they would make for that wasn't worth it. Or it could be that all this is wrong and that it was simply actually an issue of support and looking out for their customers. So
yeah, I don't
think we'll ever get a final answer, but go ahead.
Just the way that it's worded, though, it seems more along the lines of we can't sell or we decided not to sell these and here's why. Like more along those lines versus if it was some kind of sponsored thing or something like that. They don't say one word about NVIDIA in this press release.
Well, correct.
Right? They're not,
they wouldn't. It would be way too obvious at that point.
Well, I guess. I don't know. If I was a PR person for, let's assume NVIDIA was behind this and I was their PR person coming up with this kind of a strategy thing, I would put something about my own company in there. You know what I mean? I'd just be like, even a one-liner.
I think as the only other major graphics competitor, you don't have to hype yourself up as much as knock the other guy down. Because once if somebody reads it and goes, oh man, AMD Radeon must be really crappy, I guess I'll buy NVIDIA, right? Like I guess I'm going to go with Intel integrated. Like hopefully nobody ever made that thought process. But I could see, this happening. I understand the train of thought that Charlie went down, but I don't really know, and I hope it's not. So let's move on. We got one more story that you brought up, just added into the show notes just a little bit here. So if we don't have a visual for it, I apologize. But this is Western Digital announcing brand new Sentinel small business NAS devices.
Yeah, so Sentinel last year released a Sentinel, like a DX4000, which is basically a 4-bay, I believe that was a dual-core Atom-powered NAS. Right. So it ran like Windows 2008, R2, that sort of thing. It wasn't very powerful because, it didn't have a lot of compute power, didn't have a lot of RAM, that sort of thing. But it was decent as just like a NAS device. And they also made a rack mount version of it that was 4 bays, but they were just spread out horizontally. Well, what they've done is they've sort of revamped that line. So now they have the DS5100 and DS6100, and these are way more beefy. It's still the same kind of form factor. It's still a relatively small device, 4 hard drive bays in it. But this somehow they managed to cram into here, and it's like sandwiched between the hard drive cage and the top of the device. It's dual core Xeon with like multiple gigs of RAM and dual gigabit and iSCSI and onboard RAID, like hardware RAID solution. And it's basically enough stuff to run Windows 2012 R2, but it's running the Essentials version because it doesn't really need, a
So it
full-blown.
it has Windows on it?
Yeah, it has Windows on it, and this device, unlike the previous model, can sort of shoehorn in a pair, not just one but two 2.5-inch drives. So you can put, say, 2.5-inch SSDs in there, and they actually lay inside the chassis on either side, like under the cover, but on either side of the hard drive cage, the center hard drive cage. So they're using almost every nook and cranny of this pretty small box. I mean, this thing is not very large. And I like that because now you can have redundancy on a drive. I always want to have the OS on something that's not the mass storage, right? You have something that, mass storage device. You don't want to have the OS sharing with that, because then if you have
that sounds like a bad idea.
Right? Because if you have some kind of a demand on the OS and the mass storage at the same time, then they both suffer because the hard drive has to thrash between both, and it's just a bad idea. So this way you can have 2 smaller drives. You don't need a huge drive for your OS because you have terabytes and terabytes of storage, mass storage available.
Sure. Right.
And you can have them redundant. You can have a RAID 1 set up for that.
Can you hook up like a monitor and keyboard to this?
I asked them specifically about that, and yes, you can. But here's the thing: it's not meant to. It's meant more for the server or just for the configuration end. So it's not DVI, it's not HDMI. It's just regular VGA, which is actually something that in the enterprise or the business sector they prefer that for server kind of gear, right? I mean, actually, Ryan, you have a couple of 1U or 2U kind of devices there, and you probably notice almost every one of them has a VGA out of the back, right?
Yep.
Because it's just when you get the 24-to-1 APC KVM switch, so you can control all these things that are in a rack. Those devices tend to be VGA switching, not DVI or HDMI or that kind of thing. So you're not going to be gaming on this thing. You're not going to be doing, I mean, you could get away with running Office, I suppose, but why would you want your secretary using your business NAS? Yeah, that'd be kind of silly. But it does give you all the flexibility of, you can fire up, it's Windows. You can log into full-blown Windows, do all your configuration through a regular GUI, as opposed to, any other alternative. I would probably just get in there long enough to install VNC, and then I would always just remote in anyway. But that's just me. Some people are just going to want to have it sitting at a desk and with its own monitor and keyboard so they can walk over to it and reconfigure it and whatnot. Because this is a kind of a powerful device, right? You can have it doing more than just a NAS with dual core Xeon in it. It could easily be like a SQL server or, other things.
I'm trying to even figure out what a dual core Xeon is. Like, I honestly don't know what that is.
Which chip? I think it's one of the lower power ones. I think it's.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look because it doesn't give model numbers in that table. It just kind of says dual core Xeon.
But I do like the dual gigabit, and if you take dual gigabit and you combine it with, Windows Server OS, you can start doing things like multi-link. You can basically gang the dual gigabit together, and if you have a switch that supports it, then it can handle greater than just single gigabit for your actual throughput from the device. So, yeah,
I'm interested in that.
Yeah,
that sounds interesting. I need to figure out my gigabit Ethernet NAS issues here in this office too. So,
yeah, the only thing I wish that it had was just more than 4 bays. Because it's like, here's all this powerful stuff, but you're just limited by 4 physical 3.5-inch drives. That's all you
So
can put in it.
maximum you can put in, what, 4 terabyte in each of those? So
Yeah,
you're
16
looking at
terabytes.
12 terabytes of RAID 5, I guess.
Yep.
All right. Let's get into a couple of emails before we close out the episode. If you want to email us, and we encourage you to do so with your hardware questions, the email address is twitch@twit.tv, twich@twit.tv, or you can follow me on Twitter. It's just at Ryan Shrout, very easily. He's not here, but Patrick Norton is on Twitter, again, at Patrick Norton. And Al, what is your Twitter handle again?
Malventano.
Just your last name, at Malventano. So email is the best way to get a hold of us, because it's in that inbox every week when I go look at it and make sure that everything's organized. Twitter, if you have other questions you might throw our way, you can use that. So let's take this. We got an email from Braden about going monitor crazy. He says, I'm currently running a 3+1 monitor setup in surround 2D on an NVIDIA GTX 670. I have no problems with my current setup, but would like to add another 2 or 3 monitors. I'm going on the 324. I game on the 3 24-inch monitors in surround with a 19-inch monitor as the 4th. I'm wondering if there's any problem buying a $30 AMD or NVIDIA card to run the additional 2 to 3 monitors for non-gaming purposes. Will there be problem having an AMD and an NVIDIA card in the same computer, or will it be better to have them both be NVIDIA? Will having an older model NVIDIA card cause any problems? Do you have any recommendations for a second card to run 2 to 3 additional monitors? Thanks for the help. I enjoy the show. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Braden.
I think you...
Alan, you got any? Go ahead.
Yeah, two things. First of all, AMD and NVIDIA in the same system is sort of like crossing the streams. Right? Cats and dogs living together. Yeah, no. You don't want that mass hysteria in your PC with 2 different driver stacks trying to run at the same time for video.
It can do it.
Oh, it can do it, but you're just asking
as of Windows 7. Yep.
Yeah, but you're just asking for every possible corner case that these guys did not consider, right? When they designed their respective drivers. Yeah.
Even worse is if he has like an Intel Ivy Bridge or Haswell and you install the graphics drivers for it. Whew, man.
Yeah, then you'll have 3 at the same time. Yeah, then you're just asking for hurt.
Yep.
However, so if he already has NVIDIA, I would just say stick with NVIDIA. Now, as far as how back you go, I think you'd want to go as far back as you can without needing a different kind of driver, right? You'd want to stay within the unified, whatever, So how far back can you go on the current GeForce?
I think you can probably go back into the 500s. The GTX 500 series, at least, maybe even the 400s.
I think the 400s. Yeah, I think you can go.
That being said,
they're going to
be harder to find. They may be actually not as they might not be that much cheaper, right?
Yeah,
so
they may be more expensive.
You should look at to run 2 monitors. Any graphics card will do that. 3 monitors depends on what connections you have, right? If you want all DVI and HDMI or something like that, you might have to look for specific ones. But you can get like a GTX 650 or GTX 640, or if you look through those lot of websites and you find a 550 or a 560 or whatever, any of those will work, really.
Yeah, I would go for the absolute bottom rung of a 600 series or 500 series. I think the 600 series you're going to get a more power efficient card, right?
Yeah,
if
that's
you go
true.
Way, you're just going with sort of a newer generation, but you're still going on the cheap.
So like the EVGA GT640 is actually still a $85 graphics card. So I'm trying to think what else is under that. GT620, maybe? Nope. There is a GT620. Those are about $60. So you can get like a Zotac one that has 2 actually, that's an interesting one. You can get a Zotac card that has 2 DVI outputs and a DisplayPort or HDMI. I can't tell from this angle. But it has 3 outputs already on it, and they're the digital ones, not like one of them's VGA or something like that. So 1 mini HDMI, 2 DVI. That's $59.99.
Do they make any kind of like DisplayPort splitter or something? Is there anything else you could?
So if you have DisplayPort and you want to connect multiple monitors from it,
is there like a switch sort of thing?
So
I don't know.
what he wants is a DisplayPort MST hub. And as far as I know, there's only one in existence.
Oh.
It's from a company called Club 3D. It is club-3d.com. They sell a multi-stream transport hub, MST hub. And let me see how much this is. Online shops.
How many does it span out to?
3. It turns one DisplayPort connection into 3 connections. And I don't see it available in the United States at all. This is a European company.
Well, okay. I guess the more important question is how much is that thing?
I don't know. That's why I was trying to look.
Yeah.
Because
if it costs more than the 620, then it's a moot point.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't understand. Not for sale anywhere in North America. So
okay. That sounds like a very, very niche thing that the NVIDIA card may or may not support in the first place. So
it's a DisplayPort 1.2 feature. So if your graphics card, and NVIDIA claims that they support DisplayPort 1.2, it should do that. But they're relatively new. They've been promised to us for like years, multiple years since Eyefinity came out. So I would look at, if you've got the extra slot for a graphics card, you can get one of those cards we talked about and expand out your displays that way. And it's fairly painless, but I would, even though you could have an AMD card and an NVIDIA card, it just makes sense to just use a single driver stack at this point. It would be nuts. Let me see if this if they have a price here. There's a review of this item. Nope, of course not. Nope, 93 pounds.
So that's more than the 620.
Yeah. Yep, quite a bit more, actually. So there you go. How about an email from Robert about thermoelectric coolers? Does anyone still use TECs, Peltier coolers? Any benefit to using them with current generation Intel processors for overclocking? Maybe even a chilled water system for video card water blocks? I see DangerGen has closed shop. Is this part of the hobby dying out? Alan, you tell me, is it dying out?
I think it's just too much of it's a niche of a niche. Right?
TEC, definitely.
You already have to be, if you're going to use one of those, you're going to be dumping massive amounts of heat because you're adding additional current and power to the equation, which you still have to get rid of somehow, right? So you may be able to drop the temperature a little bit lower on the CPU side, but you're still making the temperature much hotter on the other side. So most of those people that do that will tend to water cool on top of that, or do even more insane things like if at an overclocking competition, they're doing liquid nitrogen and stuff like that. So it's just, it's just too far over the top, right? It's Well,
I mean, you're adding current. Are you adding a whole lot of current for that? I honestly don't know.
Yeah,
I understand
there are ones that are they're like 40 watts, 60 watt. So they're drawing that. Yeah, they're drawing that power.
Okay.
I mean, granted, it does make the cold side colder, but the hot
it makes
side
the hot side hotter.
Yeah, by that much wattage.
Probably an equal amount. Yeah, the way the conservation of energy works.
Well, yeah.
So it's funny he brought that up because I haven't even thought about Peltier coolers in forever. And water cooling has gone. I think water cooling has even gone away from what you do and what Maury does, more into the self-contained water cooling, which is really not that much more effective than good air cooling. It's kind of like this weird cycle that we're in. I'm kind of hoping that water cooling, as it is, makes a comeback. It's significantly more expensive. It's a much bigger hassle, as you've already told us, and you definitely get benefits out of it. But what are those benefits and how much do they actually affect the average person is can be pretty hard to define, right? Noise and cooling and that stuff it's much more personal preference than, say, how many frames am I getting per second in this game, or how fast are my videos encoding, that kind of thing that's very, very specific.
And I think it all depends on how sensitive the CPU is to temperature specifically, right? So not so much if you can just get the heat away from it fast enough, but You know,
Yeah.
it's and I think that modern CPUs are less temperature sensitive than they used to be. Right? It used to be if you dropped your CPU by 10 degrees, it made a huge difference.
Hmm.
Like, you know, you get like another gigahertz out of it or something like that. I don't think that's the case with modern CPUs where, you know, you're really just trying to get that 10 degrees or 15 degrees or so.
It still
just,
makes a huge difference, especially on these like the Ivy Bridge and Haswell parts where you are overclocking even, in my opinion, some modest amounts compared to what we used to do. And now we're hitting upper 80s Celsius temperature. I don't know if cooling that down from 90 to 80 is going to get you that much more performance out of it. But you could maybe still be able to get that actual performance delta out of there. We got an email from Adam about adding a second hard drive to a laptop. He says, so I have a laptop with 2 hard drive bays, but have currently only 1 hard drive installed. I just bought a second hard drive and I'm waiting for it to come in. My concern and question is, what do I need to do to make my laptop think it is just one big hard drive to basically double the capacity? Is it automatic? Or does Windows have a setting using Windows 7 at the moment, but will be moving to 8 later on? Or do I need to wipe the computer and configure it with 1 hard drive, or configure it to 1 hard drive and then restore a backup? We've got the right guy on here, Alan. What can he do?
Okay. So he's talking about RAID. And he wants to do it with hard drive.
I don't know if he knows he's talking about RAID though, which is interesting.
Well, he's talking about RAID. So
RAID
first of all,
0 specifically.
RAID 0, if he wants to double the space, yes, which we lovingly refer to on the PC Perspective podcast as Death Wish RAID, because you're doubling your probability of a failure, right? Especially if you're taking a nice, shiny new hard drive, which has a potential for what's called infant mortality, right? Where it's brand new, within the first month, it might just die. Yeah, that's what it's called, infant mortality. So you're rolling those dice. And you're also rolling the dice of your older hard drive, which has been sitting in your laptop for probably a number of years by now, like a year or two, right? And that might be on its far end of the stretch as far as how long it decides it wants to live. So, yeah, you're sort of doing a risky thing in the first place, and you're doing it with 2 things that are even riskier than normal at the same time. And above all of that, usually you want to have somewhat matched hard drives, at least matched capacities. If you're going to do that. And the last wrench to throw in there is the system even capable of it? It has to have a chipset that supports a RAID mode for the storage controller.
Yeah.
And so if you have a very generic or kind of bottom or lower tier system, it probably doesn't have that higher end chipset to handle that. So you might not even have the mode. So let's just throw all that out here because it's probably just safer to sort of put them together, but not put them together like they'll look like a drive, like one drive. I think that's what he really just wants to go for, right? I don't think that he's necessarily, I want to double my performance.
Right.
He just wants them to be one big drive.
Simplicity.
Right?
Yeah.
Simplicity's sake, right? You can mount, under Windows, you can mount another drive. Normally it's with a drive letter, but you can mount it as a folder under your C drive. It is possible.
I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah, you have to create the folder. So you make a folder under your C drive, whatever you want to call it. Make sure it's empty, because Windows kind of gets confused if there's already files there. And then you'd format your new drive. You just plug your new drive in. You'd boot up. You'd go into your device manager and your storage management, and you'd see the drive and you'd format it like normal. But then once it's formatted, if you right click on it, where you get the options where you select drive letter, or I forget exactly what it's called. But when you go into that dialog, you don't have to pick a letter. You can pick an actual like folder name. And then you simply point it to the empty folder that you have sitting on your C drive. And once you go into that folder in Windows Explorer or anywhere else, you would become in like the root directory of that other drive, basically. And you can switch it back and forth. You can have a bunch of stuff in there, and then later on you could decide, no, I want that to be my D drive. And you go back into storage management and you just remove the
So that's like
link.
mount points in Linux, essentially.
Sort of, yeah.
It's kind of, you can arbitrarily make any storage unit appear as anything.
Yeah, it sort of works that
structure wise. Okay.
I would definitely be careful doing that though, because if you go and I haven't tested it lately under Windows 7, but under XP you could do this as well. And if you accidentally like hit delete while you have that folder selected under your C
Yeah.
drive, then it just basically goes through and just starts blowing the whole other drive away. It just tries to delete everything.
Well,
which
I
is-
mean, that's what it does if it's just a folder on that drive, right? I guess it doesn't, you're
Yeah.
saying it doesn't send it to the recycle bin so you can restore it.
Under XP, I think it didn't. I think it worked like it was network attached storage, sort of, and it just sort of vanished. But yeah. So if
So be
you
careful.
don't want to, if you don't want it to be a separate drive letter and you just want everything together, yes, it's possible. It's not a regular thing to do, but it does exist. Personally, I would just make it another drive letter. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I do like this idea now, you know, for as the kind of stuff that we do, where I have these large Steam folders, game folders, to kind of
Yeah.
mount it
Yeah, you
as
could have
that
it-
Steam folder.
You could have it on its own drive and then just make it a folder, and then that's, you know.
Huh.
You can actually,
Interesting.
I think the folder can be several directories deep, I think, on the C drive. So you can actually name it, like your Steam folder could be empty.
Just a Steam apps
you could-
folder. Yeah.
Yeah, you could point it directly to the whole path of the Steam apps
Huh.
folder, and then if that drive had all of that content on it, it would just show back up. Be kind of cool.
Interesting. All right. Well, on that inquisitive note, I think we're going to wrap up this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. If you are new here again, let me remind you, twit.tv/Twitch is where you can go subscribe to our podcast, get the video versions. We highly encourage you to go there. You can watch all the back episodes as well. Make sure you subscribe if you like what you're hearing. And we obviously encourage you to do that. If you have an email, twitch@twit.tv, twitch@twit.tv. Alan, thanks for filling in, man.
Thanks, man. Hey, we can answer one more email in like 10 seconds.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, somebody was looking for an iGoogle replacement because it's about to go away.
Yep.
ighome.com. It's almost a blatant ripoff of iGoogle. It's
So instead of
Which I like.
iGoogle, it's ighome.com.
ighome.com. You can configure it just like iGoogle. It looks exactly the same. It's got the little tabs on the top.
All right.
It's just like a clone of it. Yeah. I'm glad somebody put that together. That's all I got to say. Because I
All
didn't
right.
want to
Easy enough.
part with it. Yeah.
All right,
well,
guys,
cool.
that's going to wrap up this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks, Alan, for filling in. And we will be back next week with another edition, episode, compilation of PC hardware. Thanks, guys.